Right now, the news is a disaster movie. Storms are smashing cities and records, crashing through homes and shattering lives. As people struggle to rebuild, more and more are searching for answers. But the truth behind these hurricanes is far more complex than many claim. So how are tropical cyclones connected to climate change? What will the future of these catastrophes look like? And is there anything we can do to shelter from the storms? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And we really need to talk about hurricanes and climate change because everyone else is, and sometimes that conversation isn't exactly the most informative. It feels like depending on where you look, you'll either see these weather disasters described as storms caused by the fossil fuel industry, or you'll hear these are just natural disasters that have always taken place. And while, spoiler alert, climate change absolutely does have a crucial role in the disasters we're seeing, honestly, neither of these perspectives really do justice to what we know and what we don't know. So this video is for anyone who actually wants to understand what's going on with the devastating tropical cyclones we've been seeing. And if you appreciate actually understanding how the climate is changing and what we can do about it, you might want to make sure you're subscribed. And for those of you watching this in the future, there's loads of science in here that's relevant to all storms like these, not just the ones in 2024, so don't go anywhere. Technically, isn't everyone watching this in the future? Oh, you know what I mean. But right now, understanding hurricanes has never been so important. Over the past years, we've seen such incredibly intense storms that some researchers have even suggested coining a new storm tier for Category 6 hurricanes to better warn people of the danger, and 2024 in particular has seen devastating tropical cyclones. As I'm making this, the US is still reeling from Hurricane Helene, which dumped 6 months worth of rain on parts of North Carolina, driving flash flooding that stranded vulnerable communities. The damage was so severe that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, blew half its annual budget just over a week into the financial year. And then, hot on the heels of Helene, came Hurricane Milton, which tore through Florida, ripping up infrastructure. Together, these storms left millions without power and caused dozens of deaths. And it's important to point out that research suggests the damage from these storms can actually cause thousands of excess deaths in the years that follow. It's so hard with numbers and with facts to capture the true human cost of hurricanes like these. But for me, the accounts from people who had to leave everything behind, from those who had nowhere safe to go or no way of getting to safety, these bring home the harm these storms have caused for millions of people. And before we talk about what's driving these storms, I've already mentioned the two sides of the debate. They're caused by climate change. It's just natural. But the thing is, there is a third extreme perspective. The people who say, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. And yeah, that is a direct quote from far-right Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And look, I guess there's a sense in which this is true if they means fossil fuel companies and control means knowingly shift. Yeah, but that's clearly not what she means by those words. No, indeed. And so it's worth emphasizing that there's absolutely no technology that could cause storms like these, and absolutely no evidence of intent to do such a thing. It's also worth emphasizing that the far-right line on climate disasters used to be that it was arrogant to think humans could have such an influence. And honestly, I'm kind of getting whiplash now that I'm hearing the polar opposite, yet equally anti-science conspiracy. And unlike with a US politician, you don't have to worry where the money for my work comes from. That's because I don't try to sell you things with sponsorships or monetization. If you want to join the team of incredible patrons keeping this channel going, click up here. Okay, great, but can we get back to talking about these storms? We can, and we should. Because while they might get the most attention when they hit North America, these storms cause devastation across the world too. too. In July, for example, Typhoon Gaemi hit the Philippines, Taiwan, and China, displacing hundreds of thousands, tearing up homes and farmland, and stranding an unprecedented number of ships across the Taiwan Strait. One Filipino fisherman recounted that a big wave higher than our house came rushing towards us and our neighbors. He and his family survived by clinging onto electrical cables, but lost everything except their lives in the storm. Okay, wait, but that was a typhoon, and what hit the US were hurricanes? Right, but hurricanes and typhoons are actually the same thing. We just call them different things when they form in different places. That seems needlessly confusing. Yeah, agreed. So I'll probably try to stick to saying tropical cyclones for most of this video. Okay, so you've just explained how extreme 2024 was. Clearly that must have been caused by climate change. To understand that, we need to understand what causes these storms in the first place. They form over the sea when hot, moist air rises, leaving low pressure behind. The air around spirals in, becoming hotter and wetter, and rising too, building up the intensity of the storm. So, because hot waters are the fuel that powers these huge atmospheric engines, hotter waters mean more fuel, means more powerful engines. Okay, I can see where this is going. Here's the logic. Burning fossil fuels is building up greenhouse gases to record levels, which is heating the planet to record levels and creating record-breaking hot seas. Which would mean more fuel for these fires, or storms. Right, but it's not just about how strong these storms become, which is defined by how high the wind speeds are. The downpours are also responsible for huge amounts of the damage. And since a hotter atmosphere holds more water, these downpours can get worse and worse as fossil fuels make our world hotter and hotter. Then there's the storm surges. These storms drag water from the sea onto land, causing even more flooding and damage. And so higher seas mean worse storm surges. So the more sea levels rise, the more damage these storm surges cause. Okay, thanks for the science lesson, but is climate change actually affecting the storms we're seeing? Yes, it is making them worse. Hurricanes are tough to pin on climate change because there are so many factors that drive them and so many factors that cause their damages. But scientists are getting better and better at asking what difference a warmer world is making to these storms. Researchers do this detective work by looking for climate change's fingerprints on a storm. They compare how often and how severely these disasters take place in today's climate to what could have happened in the climate that might have been. You know, if we hadn't pumped billions of tons of greenhouse gases and other pollution into the atmosphere. Take Helene. Climate change's fingerprints were all over it. Heating the planet has made the conditions that led to the storm, the exceptionally hot sea surface, hundreds of times more likely. And heating the planet has made the storm itself more intense and more likely, both when it comes to the winds and the rains. In fact, maximum wind speeds of similar storms are now 6 meters per second higher thanks to climate change. Doesn't sound like that much. I mean, the maximum wind speed was like 60 meters per second, so we're only talking about around a tenth of that being down to climate change. You're right, it doesn't sound like much. But you've got to remember that for extreme events, every bit of extra extremeness makes a huge difference. One study estimated that it means that almost half the damages Helene caused in Florida could be pinned on climate change, finding similar results for Milton too. Can researchers really work out exactly how much of the devastation climate change is responsible for? Well, no, not exactly. But the takeaway from these numbers is that just a little bit more wind can cause a hell of a lot more damage. Okay, but you keep talking about how climate change made the situation worse. That's right. But we got just as many of these storms decades ago as we do now. Okay, that's just climate denial. You can't just label anything you don't like denial. I know you are, but what am I? Okay, hey, settle down. But look, the truth is, you're right. Wait, I am? Yeah, as far as we can tell, climate change isn't making tropical cyclones more common. Which is good news? Well, kinda. but mostly not really. Firstly, we don't know whether the number of storms is actually staying the same, or if our data going back decades just isn't very accurate. And secondly, there's quite a bit that we do know quite well, and isn't good news. While the number of storms isn't changing, the intensity of these storms seems to be going up, as we'd expect from all that science I was talking about earlier. On top of that, the paths the storms follow are shifting, exposing new and relatively unprepared areas to devastation. And researchers have even seen that the hurricanes are passing over land more slowly. Okay, but now surely hurricanes slowing down is a good thing. Well, you'd think so, but this doesn't mean the wind speeds are slowing. It means the hurricanes take more time to move from place to place, which means they dump more rain and cause more damage in the places they visit. And all these changes are down to climate change. Well, the science points to climate change being behind bigger and bigger downpours with these hurricanes, and there's evidence building that it's also turbocharging the winds. The slower speeds as hurricanes move over land could be down to burning fossil fuels too, and it's very likely that the really active storm seasons that we've been seeing in recent years can only be explained if you take our pollution into account. So yeah, there's more and more evidence that climate change is making these storms worse and making the worst of these storms happen more often. Can't you just give us a straight answer? Yeah, I mean, are these storms caused by climate change or not? Honestly, I can't give you a straight answer to that because it's not the right question. It doesn't make sense to describe them as purely natural or purely caused by burning fossil fuels. No one single thing caused these disasters, just like no one single thing caused my last relationship to be a disaster. So I can't say that it all fell apart because I was constantly burning fossil fuels, but that definitely made things worse. Okay, so then the question should be, is climate change making these storms worse? And the answer to that is yes. It is. Okay, so climate change has made the situation worse. I guess this is just the new normal. Except it isn't the new normal because it's not going to stay like this. It's going to keep getting worse. I sometimes wish you'd skip straight to the part about what we can do. Don't worry, I'm getting there. But to understand that, we need to understand that as long as humanity keeps burning fossil fuels, whose greenhouse gases keep heating the planet, we can expect the threat of tropical cyclones to keep getting worse. Okay, so they're already worse because of climate change, and they're gonna keep getting worse the more we heat the planet? That's right. You seem weirdly cheerful about that. Well, that's because the opposite is also true. They'll stop getting worse once we stop heating the planet, and we know how to do that. Right, stop burning fossil fuels and emitting greenhouse gases. Exactly. Once we do that, the intensity of these storms will also level off, with the exception of storm surges, which will sadly continue to rise as our seas continue to rise. Okay, but the best we can hope for is to stop these disasters getting worse? Well, actually, we can do better, because these disasters aren't just about the storms themselves. How much they hurt us also depends on us. It depends on how well we plan in advance, both in the years before disaster strikes and in the days before the storm hits. We saw this with Gaemi when it hit poorly planned areas of cities which simply hadn't been built to withstand storms like these. It depends on how well we're able to get word out to the people in harm's way and how we're able to help them find their way to safety. Helene showed that storms can hit communities that aren't used to hurricanes and don't have plans or infrastructure to get to safety. It depends how good we are at prioritizing the people who are the most vulnerable and least able to move, since these disasters always hit the poorest the hardest. And it depends on the resources we provide after the storm, for rescue and for rebuilding, whether we as a society prioritize protecting ourselves from danger or pouring more money towards destruction. And while no, we can't soften the storms, we can do so much to improve every single aspect of our preparedness and our response. to soften the blow when the storm hits. But if you're sat there wondering, how do we even begin to end climate change? Well then, my last video is for you, all about how we can build unstoppable momentum towards a cleaner future. Okay, until next time, bye.
Bye.
Bye.